Hi, this is Charles Shaughnessy. You might know me as Mr. Sheffield from The Nanny. And you're listening to my interview with Elaine Goodman from Gogoodman.com.au.
You were born into an acting family. You grew up in Britain. Your father was a writer and your mother was an actress. Did acting always take your interest?
You know, it did from a very early age, but it was not really to do with my parents. You know, they were in the business, and so there were actors and writers and directors sort of coming in and through the house at different times. But when I was very young and learning to read at school, like, 4 years old or something, and they would the teacher would ask us to read out loud. And when she said, anyone want to read out loud, everyone would dive under their desks, except me. I would stick my hand out and say, me, choose me. I loved reading out loud. I loved being dramatic and reading to the class. So when they did a play, they decided to do a school play, I assumed I would be the star of the play, which was Peter Rabbit.
You assumed?
And to my horror, my friend was Peter Rabbit, and I was like second bluebird from the left. So all I said was, tweet, tweet, look out, Peter. And my friend had all the big lines, and I remember feeling miserable, and then at the same time realizing that it was kind of interesting to me how miserable I was feeling. And I thought, this must be important to me.
You can't assume anything in the acting world.
That was my first inkling that I wanted to be an actor.
You can't assume anything in the acting world.
I'm sorry?
You can't assume anything in the acting world.
No, you can't assume anything. No part is yours until you sign the contract, even if you're 4 years old.
So that's interesting. You were always the person that wanted to read in class. I was like that as well, except when I was like studying French or Hebrew. I wasn't really that interested in reading out loud.
Right. No, I always, if there was ever a chance to read out loud, I wanted to do it. And I didn't know whether it was because I liked the attention or I just really enjoyed the sort of drama of telling a story. And I think it's probably a bit of both, And so anyway, yeah, I kind of acted all my way through school. I got a law degree at Cambridge University because I thought maybe I should do something more sensible. But in the end, I thought, no, I need to do what I need to do. So I became an actor full time.
Did you study a language in school, and was that enthusiasm to read still the same as it was in English?
Yeah, to an extent. In England we learned French from a pretty early age, and then I learned German as well, those two languages, and Latin. In fact, I did win a prize for declaiming in Latin.
I don't know what declaiming means.
I declaimed a speech of Cicero or someone.
I don't know what declaiming means.
Saying it, but rather dramatically, like a speech of Cicero before the Senate.
Right.
And I did it in Latin. Hic ecce homo quindidium.
Sounds like something out of Harry Potter.
Yeah, really, it was. Well, my school, my prep school, was very like Harry Potter. Was like Hogwarts. We would actually go to school on a train. My parents would bring me with my big traveling trunks of suitcases to Paddington Station, and at a particular platform there would be this particular train that was our train, and it would take us from Paddington to Oxford, where we were met by a bus that took us to the school. And then the school was a boarding school, so we stayed there. You lived there, and we had a collection of very strange, eccentric masters who were just like Snape and Dumbledore, and this sort of labyrinthine school with big halls and towers and dormitories and things. It was exactly like Hogwarts.
So British.
Yeah.
Did you grow up going to because I know you've had a deep history in acting in theatre as well. Did you grow up going to the theatre a lot, or were you more into film and television?
Yeah, I love going to the theatre. My first trip to the theatre was a disaster. My parents took my brother and me to see Jack and the Beanstalk, the Theatre Royal Windsor, and right at the beginning of the show, the two giants come down to the center of the stage and sing a song about eating little boys' stew, and one of them says, I like mine toasted with cheese on, and I look at my brother and I go, this isn't right. They're gonna eat us. We didn't know it was a play. I'd never been to a play before. So I grabbed him and we charged out of our seats over my parents before they could catch us, up the aisle and into the parking lot. And that was it. We just refused to go back in. And my parents had to drive us all the way home. That was my first experience of seeing a play.
And, well, my next question is, you started performing in theatre at school. Do you remember your first role? But you've already told me that was as a bluebird, so we can skip that question.
That was the bluebird, yeah. That was my very first role. I was the bluebird. My mother made me a beautiful costume, but it didn't make me feel any better. I still thought I was robbed.
And you've held a grudge to this day?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Peter Robinson, who was my best friend, was no longer my best friend.
And where is he now?
It took a long time for us to sort of make up.
Do you know where he is now?
No, I don't. I don't know where he is. I don't know what he's doing, actually. I wonder if he even remembers that.
You almost, as you mentioned as well, you almost got into in the law profession at university. Well, you did. You studied law, but you joined a comedy review as well and subsequently enrolled in drama school. Were your parents happy with this decision?
You know, they were always incredibly supportive of whatever that my brother and I wanted to do. So they would love for me to have gone on to be a lawyer. My dad especially, I think, was very enthusiastic at the idea of me becoming Lord Chief Justice one day. But when I decided that was it, I wanted to be an actor, they completely understood and got behind us and were very encouraging. So, you know, yeah, in the end, it was like I joined the family firm, you know.
So by this stage, you'd had a taste of comedy and drama. What year did you move to America?
I came to America in '83. I met my wife at drama school. She was an American student studying in England for 3 years at the same drama school as me. And we started dating. And then after I finished drama school, I was working in England for a couple of years. And then eventually we decided we wanted to get married. So rather than her come to live in London, I decided, why don't I come over and we'll live in Hollywood. And so I sort of started all over again in America. And it took about a year, I guess, to get my first job. I started working again, starting in theater, and then got onto a TV show, and sort of my career took off here.
So from doing a bit of research on you, after you moved to America, it seemed you kind of got into acting after you said you started in theatre, but you got into TV with 13 appearances on a show called Jury, 1 appearance on a show called Partners in Crime, and 1 appearance on General Hospital before getting a regular role on Days of Our Lives in 1984.
On Days, yeah.
Did that all happen as quickly as it sounds?
Partners in Crime and Jury were both in England. In fact, Jury was a BBC series. I was one of the main characters in that. And that show actually came out on the air just about exactly the time I left England and came to America, which drove my agent crazy. So I did those 2 things in England, Partners in Crime and Jury. And then when I came out here, I did some plays. I did a play called The Genius, which was a Howard Brenton play. I did a play with Alan Bates called Patriot for Me, and a couple of other things. And then I got a short role on General Hospital for a week. And then pretty soon after that, on to Days of Our Lives. And it was meant to be like a 3-day job on Days of Our Lives. And it turned into 8 years.
So did that all happen as quickly as it sounds when I'm reading it on IMDb?
No, it took a little while. I was very fortunate. I didn't have to wait that long. I was doing Equity Waiver little plays pretty soon after I arrived here. But the sort of big breakthrough, I guess, was doing Days of Our Lives, and that was about a year after I got here. I had to wait about a year and a bit, maybe 18 months.
So skip forward to 1993, and this is the part I'm very excited about because I'm a big comedy buff, big 90s sitcom buff. I grew up in the 90s and have gone back and watched a lot of sitcoms. And your whole world changes when you get your foot in the door of the 90s sitcom boom. I'm a bit mentioned, I'm a big comedy buff. So can you tell me a bit about what appealed to you about The Nanny and about Mr. Sheffield and moving into the comedy genre after so many years in drama?
Right. Well, first of all, people ask me what was my favorite job, and I have to say Days of Our Lives was probably the most fun I had in my professional career, because during the day when you were rehearsing the show, you could sort of play around a bit with the scenes, because it was all very melodramatic. So as long as you were serious when it came time to tape, you could sort of get all your jollies out of the way during the day. So I would laugh and make everyone else laugh by sort of playing up the comedy side of the ridiculousness of the situation. So I kind of began to get some comedy chops on Days of Our Lives, playing very dramatic roles. But while we were rehearsing it, we would be, doing a kind of satire version, a Saturday Night Live version of it. And so when I left Days, the producer said to me, I never forget this, he said, well, I'm sorry to see you go, but good luck with everything. And I predict that within the year, you're going to be doing a comedy. You're going to have your own sitcom. And that was the first time anyone had sort of told me they thought I was funny. And sure enough, he was absolutely right. That following pilot season, a script came up for a show called The Nanny. I was very anxious about it because I thought that the role of a sort of British sitcom dad was going to pigeonhole me a bit. I was going to get typecast. So anyway, a script for this sitcom, The Nanny, arrived. And I told my agent I was a bit nervous about being a sitcom dad, because you can get stuck in that, and people don't see you as anything else. So I said it better be a successful show so I can get a good few years out of it, because I'm not sure it'll be easy for me to get cast in anything else afterwards. So anyway, we did the show, and sure enough, it was a success. It went for 6 years. And it was a little hard for me to get other things after that for a while. It took a couple of years for people to see me as anything other than Mr. Sheffield. But then, I sort of started working. As I got older, I could get away from that character and do other things.
What was your first impression of Mr. Sheffield?
I knew who he was, a bit like my dad. My dad was a writer, but was sort of a family man, but was most of his energy and his attention was in his writing. So he would sometimes be in the middle of the room with us kids running around shrieking about something, and my mum trying to get the dinner cooked. And he would just sort of look confused, and sometimes call my brother and me by the wrong names, And I just suddenly thought that was a bit Mr. Sheffield.
So Mr. Sheffield has become a descriptive word now, has become an adjective.
Right. It's like, there was a wonderful line in one of the episodes where someone described him as standing in the middle of a room like a stunned beast. I thought that's very descriptive of it. Just this kind of, just a large animal, just sort of confused and stunned and completely lost as to what direction it's meant to move next. And that's a bit Mr. Sheffield-y. And I have to confess, it's a bit me sometimes.
I've been watching The Nanny from the beginning on an Australian streaming service similar to Netflix, and I honestly think it had one of the best pilot episodes of any sitcom that I've seen. Apart from the intro theme, the characters were all introduced and put into place early on, and the kind of hierarchy was established all in one episode in that 22, 23 minutes, and the whole series was basically set up. There was nothing else to establish from then on, basically. Was it an instant hit back in 1993?
You know, it's very interesting you say that, because no one else has mentioned that or had that perspective on the pilot. And I agree with you 100%. I thought that it was one of the best pilots I had seen. For those very reasons, it established everything. The tone of the show, the characters, the relationships, and then, as you say, everything after that was a kind of variation on that theme. There was almost nothing had to be added. And it did take time. The first year, we didn't get much of an audience. They would pick us up at sort of 6 episodes at a time and then take a break and then a few more. And then what they did is in the summer, when they do reruns, they reran The Nanny on a Monday night, which was the big comedy night. And they gave us a shot. They said, you know, if you can get an audience on the summer on Monday, you know, we'll pick you up. Well, sure enough, the audience found us over that summer. And we came back to a second year, and it just built. The numbers built every week. And by about the third season, we knew we had a surefire hit.
And I guess, I mean, if I compare it to something like Friends, it took a couple of episodes to kind of establish the characters. But from the very first episode, you knew you kind of had to feel a bit sympathetic towards Fran. You knew Mr. Sheffield was kind of, I guess, you felt sympathy towards him because he was a widow, but he was a bit of a risk taker. And you knew Niles was a bit of a smart ass. So I think it just established the characters. And the kids all had their own little personalities as well. Like Brighton was a bit of the attention seeker. And Gracie was the mental patient.
Right, Grace is a mental patient, and Nicole, Maggie, was the sort of teenage with all the hormones and boyfriends and needing Fran's attention, sort of as a woman to woman, as a growing woman, and someone that, you know, her dad couldn't begin to speak to. So you're right. All those relationships are in place, and all the dynamics. You know, what was so great about The Nanny is that you could take any two characters, whether it was Fran and Niles, or Maxwell and Cece, or Cece and Niles, or Maxwell and Niles, and you could put any of those combinations together in a scene, and there would be a very specific, different dynamic. So you could play around with any combinations you want, and it would be a fun to watch, which was kind of, not many shows have that.
Yeah, I mean, not even Friends really had that. Like, you didn't see like Monica and Joey a little bit, but it wasn't as you didn't feel as confident watching it when certain two characters were in the same room, like Phoebe and Chandler.
Exactly.
Phoebe and Chandler.
Certain two characters would have their chemistry. But some of my favorite scenes were actually with me and Niles, you know, and then there was the scenes with Fran and Cece, you know, let alone between me and Fran or Cece and Niles, you know. And then, as you say, you throw the kids in, and there would be a whole different dynamic. And then you throw in Grandma Yetta or Sylvia, and those add to the sort of combination.
What was I know 90s sitcoms, some of the sets looked really extravagant on screen. What was your favorite part of that mansion?
I think we did most of the scenes in the kitchen, and I think that was always a sort of more fun because there was a sort of traffic patterns and people coming in and the swing doors, and you could be playing a scene upstage or right downstage where everyone sits and has their coffee. So it was a very cozy and practical set, which was always fun. Those scenes were always rather fast-paced and very funny.
I met Daniel Davis, who obviously plays Niles, when he came to Australia last year for a convention, and he said The Nanny was pitted against The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. How did The Nanny's ratings stack up with the other big sitcoms in its prime? Did you take notice of that?
Yeah, we are all pretty, it's something you never take notice of until you get in a show, and then suddenly the ratings become very important. So we would watch, and the only one I remember was there was a show called Coach, which I believe was on ABC, and that was the #1 Monday night show for a long time, and we were creeping up on it, and then finally one week the headline in the Hollywood Reporter was Nanny spanks Coach. we had come first that week.
Did you get a copy of that article?
Yeah, I think we all had it. I don't know where it is. It was somewhere. I think I had it. I know that the producers have it framed.
Framed. Speaking of Niles, he had some of the best lines in the show when he was insulting Cece. Did the kids ever ask about what some of his lines meant? How did you guys kind of help the kids remain kids?
They had because they were all rushing off to do, whenever they weren't actually on set working, they were at school. They would have a teacher, around the back of the sets. There was a special room set aside as a schoolroom. So they wouldn't be seeing a lot of the rehearsals when they weren't actually in it. They would be off working. And, certain things that were explained, if it was they needed to know, they were pretty bright. They were a lot more knowledgeable and worldly than they seemed. So there was never any kind of issue, and it never got that, risque or obscene or anything like that. So it was always a gentle kind of references, which usually bright, and usually Benjamin Salisbury would, know exactly what was going on, would explain it to Madeline.
Some of the double entendres, I don't think you could even put on TV today unless it was in like a late night slot.
Right.
Do you remember any quotes that stuck out to you, whether it be Mr. Sheffield?
I can't remember many quotes, quite honestly, but there were quite a few. I'm sure with Niles holding his feather duster and gesticulating at Cece with a double entendre.
Was Fran Drescher a good boss?
Yes, she was. She had huge responsibilities on her shoulder right from the start, because there really were not few. I mean, you could count the number of women who produced, created, wrote, and starred in their own shows. In the early 90s, not many had done that. And so there was a lot riding on it. She knew there was a lot riding on her shoulders. She was in a very male-oriented and dominated business, both with the studios and the network. So she had to protect her baby, fiercely. But she knew that, we were the team. She was very much the kind of captain of the team. And was great. I remember the first day we all arrived for the pilot to rehearse the pilot, and she arrived with this huge pot of spaghetti bolognese, and fed us at lunchtime. She said, "I've got to take care of my family," So yeah, she was great.
You unfortunately didn't win an Emmy award for The Nanny, but you did win one for a role you played in the cartoon Stanley, and you've done a lot of voice acting over your career in like shows that I grew up with as well, kind of pop culture cartoons like The Wild Thornberrys, The Tale of Despero, right, Scooby-Doo, Rugrats, Hey Arnold, and plenty of others. What do you like about voice acting? It's always an interesting comparison with actors I interview.
It's really fun because you don't have to worry about any of the physical side of it. You create all that with your voice. So it's wonderful to be able to focus on creating this character. It's always good to see the animator's idea of the character. So you see a couple of sketches, so you can get a sense of the character and what they look like. And then you just channel everything into what they sound like, and expressing a character through their voice and how they react to things, all vocally. So it has its own challenges, but it's extremely liberating. You get to really play.
You've also been on plenty of other shows aimed at teenagers like Hannah Montana, Victorious, and Sabrina. Is it rare for an actor to appear on so many shows that are aimed at so many different demographics?
Yes, I was talking to someone the other day about that, and it hadn't really struck me, but I have. I've got like demographics right across the board, from the sort of grannies that love to watch NCIS all the way to the toddlers who watch Stanley. And I enjoy that, it's a lot of fun. You get to plug into different styles. Most of the things for kids are rather broad. The sort of Nickelodeon comedies are kind of broad comedies, a lot of slapstick, all the way up to the sort of rather more subtle adult dramas. So, and I've done stage, I've done musicals, I've done animation, I've done little movies, I've done TV. So it's been a terrific career. I've really enjoyed doing as much as I possibly can in different genres, different characters, different media. I wouldn't be able to choose one above the other. I'm delighted that I've been given the terrific opportunities that I have. But yeah, so I enjoy that. I mean, doing Victorious and Hannah Montana, you're working with someone who was a cultural phenomenon, working with Miley Cyrus and then Victoria Justice. I mean, and on the Victorious, of course, who is the girl who's become a huge pop star? Do you know what I mean? She was her best friend.
I didn't really watch Victoria Justice. It probably wasn't quite aimed at me.
Yeah, no, maybe not. But there's a girl in it. I'm trying to think of her name now. But anyway, and it was sort of all my kids were like hugely impressed that I'd worked with them.
I can look it up for you. Well, we'll keep moving on, and I'll look it up.
Yeah, I'll get it in a minute.
It'll come to you. So, since 2002, you've been back on Days of Our Lives, reprising your old character, Shane Donovan. Is it a bit nostalgic? Do you get nostalgic?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the last time I went back was just so much fun. It was all the old gang. They have so many people on that were on in my day. We were chasing Stefano Donera, just as we had always been doing. We were sort of basically saying the same dialogue. Stefano was doing the same bad stuff, and it was like extraordinary. It was like stepping into a time machine. Everyone was just a little bit slower, a little bit older, a little bit slower. No one was actually jumping over the furniture and racing after the bad guy. It was more a kind of steady trot.
So, Victoria's...
But that was a lot of fun.
Victoria Justice, Elizabeth... Ariana Grande.
There we go, Ariana Grande. Yeah.
I looked that up.
Who was a darling. She was a sweet girl. But, she became this sort of huge...
phenomenon.
Pop star. Yeah.
Yeah. You've also gone back into theatre in the last 10 years as well, 10 years and a bit. A lot of actors start in theatre and return to theatre after or in the middle of their screen careers. What drew you back to theatre acting?
It's just the most exciting. I mean, it recharges your batteries. It really does remind me why I do this. Sometimes when you're doing TV or any kind of screen acting, it becomes very intimate. It's very private. Things take a long time. You can sit around, to do one scene. It's not a sustained performance. You turn it on and off. Whereas for a play, you rehearse a character for 2 or 3 weeks. You completely inhabit it. You know who he is, and how to play every little moment. And then you get to do it every night for 2.5 hours in front of real people who sort of join you in this conspiracy, this journey of imagination. And there's just nothing more exciting than that. It's exhausting and it's challenging, but it's the most exciting.
And
So I would hate to not have that opportunity every once in a while.
does it take a little while to remember a whole play worth of lines when you may not have done it for a little while?
I'm very lucky. I'm very, very blessed to have a good memory. It's always a little bit frightening and daunting when you first start looking at the play and you go, oh my God, this is like pages and pages of dialogue. But I've done some pretty challenging parts. I did a play with Judy Kuhn called The Unexpected Man, and it was just the two of us in it. We are in a train compartment, and each character has about 4 pages of dialogue and then to themselves, and then the other character has 4 pages, and then the other one has 5 pages, and the other. So you had to learn huge chunks of dialogue. But it was fun. I managed it, and it's really exciting. You get to kind of really lose yourself inside a character.
You mentioned even on when you were first on Days of Our Lives, you always had that kind of comedy side to you. And I've mentioned that I'm a big comedy buff. I love the 90s sitcom genre, all the comedians that came through the early through late 80s as well. And so being someone that played such a well-known character in arguably the greatest decade of comedy so far, what does comedy mean to you?
Wow, that's an interesting question. It's, comedy is a reflection of the absurdity of human existence. If you want to get really philosophical about it.
Go on.
Excuse me. I shouldn't have been eating peanuts earlier.
Oh, God.
Oscar Wilde said, life is far too important to be taken seriously. And I think that's something that I completely agree with. And so no matter how serious a situation might be in life, there's always a funny side to it. And if you can find that and laugh at it and encourage other people to laugh with you at it, it's a great tonic. It's a great reliever. It's a great comforter. It gives people a chance to look at their troubles in their own lives in a different perspective and get some kind of relief from what's weighing them down. So I've always really enjoyed it.
So right at this very moment, what are you working on? What pies have you got a finger in?
Well, at the moment, there's nothing immediately on the horizon. There's a couple of things that may be coming up in the spring. There's a chance of doing another movie. I did a movie in Hawaii recently, and the company that I work with, they seem to be interested in me doing another one. And then a play possibly in Laguna. So we'll see. This business, you're sort of not working until suddenly you are.
And remember, you can never assume anything.
And never assume anything. It's exactly. You can't go to the bank on it until you sign the contract.
In 2007, you became Baron Shaughnessy in Britain. What does that mean?
Well, there was a great-grandfather, my great-grandfather, who was an immigrant from Ireland when he was a child. And he joined the railroad in Milwaukee and ended up at the Canadian Pacific Railroad in Canada and actually became president of it. And in 1916, because he put the whole company at the disposal of the British Crown, who was fighting the First World War at the time, they rewarded him with a baronetcy, and he became Baron Shaughnessy, the first Lord Shaughnessy. And that title bounced around through the family on the Canadian side. and eventually ran out of male heirs on the Canadian side, and so it popped over to our side of the family, and I was it. So I woke up one morning and I was Baron Shaughnessy.
Does it come with any responsibilities?
No, it comes with a couple of with a moldy robe and some very nice documents. And I do have the responsibility I have is if at the next coronation, myself and my wife will be summoned, and we have to be there at the coronation with our robes and our coronets on and witness the coronation of our sovereign. And that's it. Unfortunately, it didn't come with any castle, no family fortune, no loyal retainers. Just the robe.
No butlers or anything.
No butlers, no nothing, none of that. But I'm very proud of it. It's a great story. Great grandpa T.G. Shaughnessy. It's a wonderful story of a self-made man and serving his country. So I'm very proud of it. I don't use it. I don't call myself Lord Shaughnessy. I don't have it on my passport or anything. But it's kind of nice to have it in the back pocket.
Oh, it might help.
Yeah, you never know.
You're also active on social media. Do you find most people know you as Mr. Sheffield, or do you have more of a demographic from Days of Our Lives or something else?
It's actually 50-50. It's kind of interesting. It depends a bit on where I am, different kinds of environment, like different shops, different amusement parks. They sort of can go either way. So, and I can usually tell if I'm in, like Disneyland is probably going to be Days of Our Lives. Nordstrom's is probably going to be the Nanny.
So are you someone that can appreciate the roles that you've done in the past that you're well known for? Or do you like to move forward and keep finding something new?
It's very thrilling to be have your work well known. I remember one day when I was on Days of Our Lives, and it was in the 80s, and the soaps were hugely popular, far bigger phenomenon than they are nowadays. I mean, we would go for the weekends to open a shopping center in Kansas City, and there'll be 10,000 people show up. I mean, it would be crazy. So I remember going up to the observatory in Los Angeles and looking down at the lights of the city. And suddenly it just struck me that an enormous number of those people down there knew who I was and enjoyed my work. And it was kind of pretty eye-opening, really. I went, oh, wow. There's quite a responsibility there.
So before we get into the fan questions, where can people find you and follow your life?
I have a website, charlesshaughnessy.com, and you can follow me on Twitter. It's capital C _ Shaughnessy with a big S. And what else? Facebook. You can find me on Facebook. So I sort of do the whole social media thing. I have someone who helps me do it. She's really good at it and keeps them linked and posting things when I forget. But you can certainly follow me through the website. You can find all my different social media links there.
And before we get into the fan questions, do you have the throat capacity to give me one good Miss Fine?
Yes. You ready?
Yep.
Miss Fine!
All right, let's do the fan questions.
All right.
I'm a big nostalgia buff. So, Nicole Nelson, Magic Bottle Girl from Copenhagen and New York. She asks, what are your feelings about playing the partner of a gay or trans person? And I asked her about this. She said, if the role ever came up, would you take a role that's a bit more topical like that?
Yeah, I mean, I have done. I played, there was an episode of Franz show that she did recently called Happily Divorced. And I played a guy who was dating both her and her ex-husband. And I did a movie where I had a partner who was a man. So yeah, I mean, if it's an interesting role, then yeah, you know, it doesn't make any difference what it is. It's like playing any kind of character, whether it's a different nationality, a different sexual preference, a different background, different history, maybe, you know, playing someone from the 13th century or playing someone from the 25th century. You're always using your imagination. You're always having to place yourself into a skin that isn't yours, and a history that isn't yours, and a worldview that isn't yours, and sometimes a sexuality that isn't yours. So yeah, if it's an interesting and challenging part, absolutely.
Justin Larkin from Melbourne, and this is his exact quote on my Facebook page when I told everyone I was interviewing you. He says, "Tell him Mr. Sheffield was right to pass on Cats, worst musical ever."
That's funny. Yeah, I can't disagree. I have to say I saw it once, and that was enough.
Raymond James H. Dale from Nagoya, Japan, says, if The Nanny were to be revived right now for a reboot or a new season, where would you see your character and the others in today's world?
That's an interesting question. We sort of played around with that. You know, sometimes when I get together with Franny or anyone else from the cast, we talk about, you know, what would it be now? And we talk about it being the granny, not the nanny. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it would be kind of interesting if you were to revisit it. The kids, you know, maybe Brighton has become a kind of Silicon Valley entrepreneur, and Maxwell is still trying to produce shows, and sort of, but Brighton has become far more successful and far more famous than Brighton than Maxwell ever would. There would be kind of interesting dynamic, and Fran would still be trying to keep him, you know, in the 21st century.
Brendan Holmes from New South Wales, which is in Australia on the East Coast, wants to know, what was it like going from a show like The Nanny to your guest appearance on Stargate?
Well, like I just said, it was. It's always a thrill to just do something completely different from the last job, and I really enjoyed Stargate. I've always loved science fiction. They had this amazing studio up in Vancouver with all the technical, you know, HQ, and we actually had one of the fighters that they have. I got into this plane and starfighter, and we sort of pretended to fly, and it was kind of thrilling. It was like a Disney ride, and that character was very different from Maxwell, which makes it interesting, always interesting.
As I mentioned earlier, Daniel Davis did a convention in Melbourne last year, and Marsha Buckton from Perth wants to know, would you ever attend a convention in Australia? Do you ever think about the convention circuit?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I would love to be quite honest. It's a way of getting to see different places and meet different fans. I just don't think I've done enough for it for people to actually invite me. You know, if I did get an invitation, I would jump on it. You know, because I've always wanted to go to Australia. I've always felt that it would be fascinating place to visit. I grew up next door to an Australian family. They were my best friends growing up. So yeah, you know, if you know of anyone who wants staff, what was my name? I can't remember. Colton, Alex Colton was my name on Stargate.
Well,
or
now,
Maxwell Sheffield to come to a convention, yeah, far away.
Yeah, a couple of the conventions here have started going into the comedy genre as well. Have you had any interest from American conventions?
I did do one in Pasadena, but it wasn't a comedy convention. It was a sort of mixed bag, and it wasn't very focused. I think that if you have a convention on a specific theme that you fit into, as you say, like 90s comedies or something, then I would think there would be an interest. But I haven't heard of anything like that happening. But yeah, I mean, they're fun. We used to do it, as I say, it with the soaps. We used to go to a lot of soap opera weekends, and it was just a great chance for the fans to interact with their favorite actors, and it was a chance for us to talk directly to the fans and see what they were enjoying and see what they weren't enjoying, what their reactions were. So any kind of interaction like that in a convention setting, I think, has a value for both the actor and the audience. So yeah, if it ever came up, I would be very happy to take part in those.
Marvin Ford wants to know, how did you like working on The Nanny, and do you miss it? And he's from Richland Center, Wisconsin. I think is WI. Yeah. Yes,
we had a great time doing it. You become such a family growing up over those 6 years, growing together and riding this rocket. I mean, this show that we didn't know if it was going to go a full year, and then the next minute it's going a full 6, was very exciting. And so we shared a great deal together. And it would be fun to see everyone again. I don't know if it would be repeatable as an experience. I don't think you can. It's like, you can never go home again. I don't know if we did a revival of The Nanny that it would be anything like as much fun or as exciting, because we're all changed and done different things. And the sort of novel, we did what we did. We did The Nanny. I don't know whether you can do it again.
Yeah, I know Full House have started doing a reboot, and I know Will and Grace are in the motion of getting a reboot going. But some of the old sitcoms, especially for the ones where some of the main characters have passed away, it'd be hard to kind of recapture that feeling.
Yeah, it's just hard, exactly. And I saw, I used to enjoy the Gilmore Girls, and they did a revival of that recently. And it just was not the same thing. They were trying to recreate lightning in a bottle. And I'm not sure you can do that.
Jeremy Richards from Marquette Heights, Illinois, wants to know, since leaving The Nanny, what is your favorite role that you've played?
I think it has to be a split, a kind of tie between St. John Powell in Mad Men and Laurence Olivier in a play I did here called Orson's Shadow. It was a true story about Orson Welles working with Laurence Olivier on a play in London, and I played Laurence Olivier, and that was terrific. And also, as I say, St. John Powell in Mad Men.
You really have covered every demographic, haven't you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Maria Leon from Hot Springs, Arkansas wants to know, we've touched on this a little bit, what was it like working with Fran?
Just terrific. She's a wonderful comedian. She was a wonderful producer of the show. She had an eye for every detail. I mean, nothing escaped her notice. If she didn't think you were wearing quite the right tie, she'd change it. She knew her character, and she knew exactly what she wanted out of the show. But it was always fun, and always very pleasant and generous to work with. So nothing but good things to say.
Dan Martinez from Colorado wants to know, of all your stage roles, which one do you feel represents you as an actor the most?
I don't quite know what I would say to that. Represents me as an actor the most.
Or which one did you find the most challenging?
Well, I think maybe the most interesting, as I say, was Laurence Olivier. But then playing, some of the musicals. I also loved doing what's it called? Cage aux Folles. I played George in Cage Fall, which was a musical, so I had to sing as well. And that was a long part. That was a lot of work. It was a lot of singing and sort of moving and dancing and, very intense scenes. So that was one of the most challenging and the most fun. But I think I'd have to say sort of my last one, the one that represents me best is the one that I did last.
Lee Brown from Melbourne wants to know, have you kept in touch with the cast from The Nanny?
Yeah, to a large extent. Not everyone, but we do keep in touch. Every now and again I'll bump into people at auditions. I saw Madeline the other day and Nicole. I keep in touch with Fran, see her from time to time. I saw Benjamin the other day. And I'm seeing Renee. I think in a week's time I'm going to be going out one evening. My wife and I are going out with Renee and Joe. So yeah, we keep in touch. We don't spend time with each other on a regular basis. Everyone's lives are sort of different and separate and going in different directions. But we certainly keep in touch and occasionally meet up again.
Do you ever see? I think is it Lauren Lane, Cece's?
She's in Texas, so again, we keep in touch on Facebook and emails and things, but I haven't seen her for years. I would love to see her. She was a darling girl. I loved Lauren. She's doing great, but moved away to Texas.
Nick Johnson wants to know, ask him how he dealt with Fran's voice all the time.
Well, it sort of canceled out. I had my accent and she had her accent, so they sort of canceled each other out mid-air.
So did you have to over-exaggerate your British accent a little bit?
A little, I think, at times. They would actually catch me. Sometimes people would say, that was sounding a little American. And in fact, a lot of fans thought that I was American putting on a rather bad English accent and that Danny Davis was actually English. And they would say, you should be taking lessons from Danny Davis, because you don't sound very English. But in fact, Danny was from Arkansas and I was from London.
And there's all different kinds of English accents depending on where you are from England too.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's class and geographical in England.
And the final fan question comes from Rebecca Kinsey from Ringgold, Georgia. How was it working with Carolyn Ree on a Disney Channel movie? I was going to figure out which movie that was. I didn't have time.
Caroline was lovely. We had a great time. We made that movie, Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire. We shot it in Toronto over about 3 weeks, all at night because he was a vampire, so everything happened at night. So it was all night shooting. So we would we would start work at about 7, 8 o'clock at night and wrap at about 6 in the morning. And we had a great time. Caroline was so funny. We used to just laugh like drains most of the time. It was great. And then I worked with her on Sabrina.
On Sabrina, yeah, that was a show I grew up with as well. So you've been around absolutely everywhere. Awesome, Charles. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm a big fan of nostalgia, and I hope you've enjoyed a bit of a walk down memory lane as well. It's been really good, and I'll let you get back to cleaning your garage.
All right, thanks, Elaine. It's been really fun talking to you. Take care now. Miss Fine!